Whose is this? Oh, it's mine.
You must have at least one fond memory of your mother.
Well, my mother actually died in childbirth. Well, but it wasn't that bad. It wasn't like, I mean, obviously it was bad. You know, she died. But I grew up totally healthy. Death in childbirth is super rare. I mean, she chose to be like way deep in the Amazon for the last month of her pregnancy, hundreds of miles away from any medical facilities. So
Okay, so let's move on to the next game.
Welcome to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. I'm your host, Perry Constantine, and welcoming back a returning guest to discuss the 2024 Madam Web film is Derick McDuff. Derick, how you doing today?
I am doing well. I am excited to talk about this one because as much as I love to talk about great movies, I also love to talk about really bad movies.
Well, you definitely picked one for this. Um, but it's been a while since we've had you on the show. So before we get too much into this, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you. So, I am a podcast host myself. I host a couple of podcasts. I'm also a writer. I have done appearances at things like San Diego Comic-Con. But my podcast, my main one is called Underrated, which you've been on. And that is a show where I examine films that are underrated or underappreciated and kind of, give them maybe some of the love that they haven't received before that they deserve. I also do kind of more relevant to this show, a podcast about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Whenever there is a new Marvel release, I do an episode of that. It's called Infinity Stones and Dragon Bones. So I've actually covered this before, but only on a Patreon exclusive. So glad to be talking about it here with on the airwaves that might reach a few more people.
So remind me, because it's been a while since we've talked about your MCU show. Why did you choose Dragon Bones as the second part of that title?
So I wanted something that would show that I was talking about both the movie side and the TV side, and that was when I made the show. It was at a time when they were still very separate things, and I was like, okay, Infinity Stones, that is obviously the movies. That's the big MacGuffin that the MCU had been building to for a long time, and the big crossover that happens in the TV side, the Defenders. A lot of that is centered around these dragon bones that are buried in New York City. I think a lot of people forgot what the plot even was of Defenders, but I made the show right around that time, and I was like, "Hey, these are two things from these two separate sides of Marvel that rhyme," so it kind of naturally worked.
You know what? I had talking about that. I did completely forget that was the plot of Defenders.
Yeah, and if you forgot, you who do a superhero podcast, I think that the general audience has definitely forgotten what happened on Defenders.
Absolutely, yes, yes. So that has definitely been lost to time, I think. So kudos on you for keeping that alive. But anyway, so what's cool these days? What's kind of grabbing your attention? Movies, comics, books, video games, TV, whatever the case may be, superhero related or not.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that it's getting to that time of year when we're recording this that it's the Oscars movies are starting to kind of ramp up. So I've been trying to go see some of the more prestigious things. It wasn't at the movies, but I just watched Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, which is obviously a movie that he's been wanting to make since he was like a kid. So that was the first half didn't super work for me, but I think it really rebounded in the second half. That one was really good. I also just listened to, I usually don't do audiobooks, but I'll sometimes do them if they're nonfiction. Ed Zwick's book, which has a long title that I'm forgetting at the moment. But, if as a movie fan, I thought it was really interesting hearing kind of his anecdotes about, oh, I was doing this when I was making Glory, and Matthew Broderick was kind of a jerk, but I was working with Tom Cruise, and he kept saying, we get to make a movie on The Last Samurai. So really enjoyed that. I'd recommend it to anybody who's a fan of movies, especially like historical dramas. Ed Zwick has such an interesting career where he either makes like these really historic like epics, or he's like And this is like a fun rom com. Like I think like he has two modes, so it's really interesting to kind of get to dive into his history and his filmmaking process.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's funny. Yeah, Edward Zwick, man, that's a name you don't hear bandied about a lot, but yeah, definitely seen a lot of stuff by his that I've enjoyed. Blood Diamond, The Siege, which I think everybody forgets about The Siege, but that movie is freaking amazing,
Mm.
and it is so relevant right now, more so than probably anything else that you could go back and watch from the 90s, I think. Um, and yeah, Love and Other Drugs, that was another one that I really kind of dug. I'm not sure if you ever caught that one with
I didn't catch that one, but I remember I'd only been familiar with his historical epics. So when he came out that one, not knowing about anything about 30 something, I was like, "What?" I was kind of like taken aback. So I do need to see that one still.
You know what? It's funny. It's like that came out at the same time as this other movie, No Strings Attached, and it was
Right,
like
those are kind of like the
very,
dueling
yes,
rom
it was
coms. Yeah,
kind of like the back in the day when you had Armageddon and Impact coming out at the
right,
same
yeah.
time. So it was a very kind of similar situation with those. And of those two, I mean, they're both in like they're rom-coms, so they're
Mhm.
you take it for what they are. But for what they are, they're both pretty entertaining. Although Love and Other Drugs was definitely of a higher caliber, I thought it definitely tried to go a little bit deeper,
Okay.
whereas No Strings Attached was just kind of fun.
Yeah, yeah. And then wasn't
Uh,
Friends with Benefits too around the same time? There was like three of them.
that one, I'm not sure if that came at the same time or if it came out before. I don't remember though.
Okay. Because I
Um,
think I think that was right around the
oh
same
wait,
time
yes,
that
yes.
Friends
In
with
fact,
yeah.
yes, I think you're right. I think you're right. I think I might be mistaking Friends with
Mm,
Benefits with Love and Other Drugs. But yeah, they were both all three of those came out around the same time. But also
yeah,
Legends of the
yeah.
Fall, that was like the perpetual cable movie for like a good decade or so. Like
Yeah.
every time you turn on
Yeah.
like TNT or TBS or whatever one of those stations were, there was probably about a good 50 to 75% chance that Legend of the Fall would be on.
Right. And I love that, but you brought up Blood Diamond too, because he has this kind of story he's telling in the book about how Blood Diamond came out and it made like it was about 40-30 million dollars in the red, where it made money. It covered its budget and its advertising and everything, and it made a good chunk of money back. And somebody basically said to him, like, this is probably one of the last times we're making a movie like this. And he's like, why? It made money. And he's like, yeah, but studios would rather make a bunch of movies that might make $300 million than one, or like lose $100 million, than a kind of like more down the road movie that's cost 100 million that's going to make 200 million. And that's something that was kind of like clicked for me, because I feel like I love those quote unquote mid-budget movies, those movies that are made for like about 100 million, that aren't Avengers Endgames, but they aren't like Hereditary or something that is just made like a cheap horror film, like from A24 or like or Blumhouse or something like that. And I even did a whole panel about the death of mid-budget movies. So when he had that aside, it's I think why you don't hear names like Ed Zwick anymore, because those guys, the work that they do has kind of dried up in the modern film landscape, which is really a bummer.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing as you were going through that, and there's been a lot of talk about that over the past decade or so. I think is really that kind of that sort of discussion has really kind of entered the zeitgeist. And yeah, it's a sad thing. Like I do, obviously, I host this show, so I do love the big budget stuff, but there is also
Yeah.
something to be said for those mid budget movies. And when I'm looking over like my movie list or things that I'm thinking about to show for my classes and things like that, it is those mid-budget movies that they do kind of end up in the rotation a lot. And I think those there's a lot of good stuff being done in them. Obviously they're very professionally made because of they've got enough money to do that. But yeah, it's a lost art, I think, those kinds of mid-budget
Mm,
things where now the studios are really kind of more in the mentality of, we've got to go high stakes and try
right.
and
Yeah.
spend a lot of money to get a big return, which ironically I think actually works against them, because I think you'd have better luck if you did try for some more modest budgets, because you're going to have, a lot less road to make up.
Yeah, honestly, it's like the best way I can put it is it feels like rather than like sitting at like the poker table and like playing a bunch of good hands and seeing if they can get their money. They're just going to roulette and putting like a huge bet down on red and seeing, okay, this will be either like a huge windfall or like I'm going to lose a ton.
Yeah, I agree totally. So for my part, I've been, kind of banding around stuff here. Mostly I've been focusing on stuff for my classes. So I just finished Crazy Rich Asians for one of my classes where I use English movies as a way of like
Mm,
introducing the students to English grammar, and we kind of explore the grammar points in there. And revisiting that movie, it was really like that's one of those like rom-com movies where it's not too deep, it's not too serious, but it is just really fun to watch.
right, right.
And one of the things that always kills me about that movie is Gemma Chan's character and how her husband cheats on her. And I'm just like, every time I
Yeah.
watch, I'm like, how big of an idiot do you have to be to cheat on Gemma Chan?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's funny because I just watched that movie for the first time because I do have a soft spot for those like I call them like better than average rom coms. Those movies that are like 3.5 or 4 stars. That like you say, they don't reinvent the genre. They don't do anything particularly incredible, but they're just like really well made, well written, formulaic movies that have become another genre that has kind of become sparser and sparser. And Crazy Rich Asians was one of the last real big hits, other than Anyone But You. And I'm bummed we never got a sequel. I actually watched it because I was flying back from Alaska. I was on a cruise, and I was like, well, I've never seen Crazy Rich Asians. I've always wanted to, and I felt like a really good plane movie. Honestly, I was just like, I'm just going to be entertained by this compelling story, these good characters, great performances, for an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it was.
I'm completely with you. In fact, I also went back to the States over the summer, and on the way back, I also watched Crazy Rich Asians on the plane.
Mm.
And funny enough, I had no actual plans to introduce it to my students this semester, but I watch it on the plane, and then what I do at the beginning of this class is I give the students a list of movies and I have them rank them.
Mm.
And I have them, and I give them I try to focus on, so I choose movies that are around 2 hours. So I try to limit it to that. And I try to think of things that are going to be kind of like crowd pleasing enough. So it's not anything that's going to be too niche. It's not anything that's going to be, too extreme in terms of like violence or horror or anything like, or language even to some extent or anything like that. And obviously sexuality too and all that. So I try to, and I was looking through, and Crazy Rich Asians was one of them I put in there. So I'm like, all right, well, let's just throw that on the list and see what happens. And dude, turns out it was like it was one of the ones that got that ended up in the rankings. And it was like it was between that and I think Barbie. And I think I felt
Mm.
like this would probably be a little bit better for these students. So I decided to go with Crazy Rich Asians too. Now as for the sequel, I was curious about that as I was rewatching it in class. So I started looking it up. So the sequel definitely seems like it's not going to happen, but instead it seems
Mm.
like the TV show is going to happen.
Interesting.
And it looks like it's going to be like a continuation of the movie, so they're going to have like the same actors coming in.
That's interesting because I do feel like that kind of storytelling has really become streaming series now. Like things
Yes.
that you would get, 10, even 5 years ago, where you would have these characters that, I mean, it is based on an IP, it's based on a book, but it's not like, a like the Legend of Zelda or like Avengers or something like that. So it doesn't have that mass appeal, which, and I also love movies like that. But yeah, it seems like a lot of that stuff has just become, rather than a 2 hour movie, we're gonna do a streaming series that's like 8 episodes or whatever.
And I think that's actually Crazy Rich Asians, I think is actually a good property to do that
Mm,
with because you have all these characters, you have this big cast. So having a streaming series gives you the opportunity to go a little bit more in depth into some of the different characters and the relationships and all that. But anyway, we are not here to talk about Crazy Rich Asians. Instead, we are here to talk about Madam Web, unfortunately. I think
I
I'd
guess
rather
if we
just
have to.
I know. I think I would rather spend the rest of the time talking about Crazy Rich Asians, but we are a superhero podcast, so I think we'll have to focus on that. So let's peel the band-aid off here. This is the 2024 film This is another one of Sony's attempts to make a Spider-Man movie without Spider-Man. So this is in the
Right.
same vein as Venom, as Morbius, and as Craven. And who knows if they're still going to keep trying this because they keep failing. Like it's I mean, other than the Venom movies, which have managed to kind of be pretty entertaining for the most part. I don't know. I haven't seen the third one, but the first one I think is a lot of fun. The second one, I didn't really like it too much, and I haven't seen The Last Dance yet, so I can't really comment on that. But outside of that trilogy, these other ones, they haven't really had any real success other than, Morbius getting so much ironic love on social media that Sony thought they could actually try and re-release it.
Right. It bombed twice. I think that's so
Oh, I
funny.
know. Oh my God. And you know what the funny thing about Morbius is it's not it's not even that it's a terrible movie. It's a bad movie, but it's not like The Room terrible, right? It's just very boring and bland and
Yeah.
it just has like nothing of worth in it. And Madam Web is in kind of a similar boat, I think. But what about you? What was your history with this movie?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I obviously knew the character mostly from like the 90s Spider-Man show. So I knew that she was like an old lady who was voiced by Stanley's wife who went between different dimensions. And this is like, well, what if she was like young and sexy? And so, I did the same thing where I was like, I knew that this movie was going to be ridiculous, that it was one of these Sony Spider-Man less movies. Although Peter Parker does technically appear in this movie. This is the one of these like Spider-Man less movies where he is actually a character, given he is a like 3 second old baby, but still, like Spider spoiler, he does appear in this. But yeah, I watched this kind of on a lark just because I was like, hey, you know what? I think this movie is gonna be bad and ridiculous. Like I had seen Morbius, and so me and a friend decided to go see this. And because it was so dumb, we were like, let's see this in the dumbest way possible. So I watched this in Screen X, which, if people are not familiar, that is one of the weird gimmicks that Regal does, where they're like, what if we projected some scenes on the walls for no reason? So there's like scenes where they'll be like on the train, and it's the same kind of thing as like when you're in IMAX and the aspect ratio changes, but instead now the aspect ratio goes to, you're still seeing the screen, but now it's also playing parts of it just like on the side or playing on the wall, but it's never anything interesting. It's like a guy holding a PSP or something. So that is how I first watched this movie, and then of course I rewatched it a couple nights ago to just get a refresher. But yeah, I mostly watched it because I wanted to do a Patreon episode and make fun of it with my friend and have a couple drinks.
Yeah, I had avoided this movie and it was on my list because I'd seen I think it's on Netflix here or something. So I had it on the
Mm-hmm.
list just out of, I try to put all the superhero movies, have them all accessible on the list here. And the characters in this, like my first introduction to Madam Web was also the 94 Spider-Man TV show. And I haven't read much of her in the comics actually. So I've only seen like limited appearances. Like she started because one of the things that happened was the Cassandra Webb character, she eventually dies in the comics, and Julia Carpenter actually becomes the new Madam Web in the comics.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of at the end when she's wearing the sunglasses and everything like that, they're actually kind of basing her visually more on the Julia Carpenter version than the Cassandra Webb one. But some of the other characters, actually, I got more interested in this movie when I heard that they were going to be having the other Spider Women characters. And so they have Julia Carpenter, who's played by Sydney Sweeney, although for some reason they call her Julia Cornwall in this. I don't know why. I tried looking up to see if there's a reason why they use that name, but I couldn't find anything. Anya Corazon, who was Aranya, and then she became Spider Girl for a time, and I think now she went back to Aranya, and she's played by Isabella Merced, or Merced. I'm never sure how to pronounce her name.
Yeah, you
And
were
then
said, yeah.
finally, Merced. Okay, thank you. And then finally, it was Maddie Franklin, who is the third Spider Woman in the comics, and played by Celeste O'Connor. And she was also so Maddie Franklin's a kind of an interesting story because she was created back in the late 90s, and she was really kind of this character that nobody really liked. John Byrne got the ability to create a new Spider-Woman character, and he created this teenage version that nobody really liked, but she had a connection to Spider-Man because her uncle was J. Jonah Jameson. So in the movie, Maddie mentions about her uncle Jonah, and so that's that connection there. So that comes right out of the comics.
Yeah.
But I was involved in fan fiction, Marvel fan fiction back in the early 2000s, and someone had did a New Warriors thing, and they used like this Spider-Woman character, Maddie Franklin, and made her really kind of interesting. So I became more interested in her through like fan fiction and that kind of stuff. And then she popped up in the Brian Bendis Alias series, which was the inspiration for Jessica Jones. She popped up in one of those arcs in there, and then later she appeared in this really cool limited series called The Loners, and I really loved her in there, and I wanted to see more of the character based on that. But I think actually she's been, if I'm thinking correctly, I think she may have been killed in the comics, so I don't think she's around anymore. But all three of those being involved in this got me a little bit more interested in it than just Madam Web herself. And then we also have Ezekiel Sims, who appeared in the J. Michael Straczynski Spider-Man run from the early 2000s. And he kind of appeared as this sort of like mentor type figure. He was interested in, there's this kind of thing that Straczynski was playing with, this idea of like this spider totem, where it's like this idea of like, different spider themed people. And basically it was kind of this idea that posing this question of, did the radiation come first or did the spider come first? Like, which is actually responsible for Peter getting the spider powers? And he was an interesting character, but he's like very different in this. So that was kind of my, going into this, that was kind of like where I was coming from. And I'd avoided the move. I try not to prejudge any of these movies. I try to always go in with an open mind and say, like, even if it's bad, and sometimes even if it's bad and I go in with that expectation, I might end up being kind of more appreciative of it. I might come back with a better opinion of it. That did not happen with Morbius, and that did not happen with this either. It was just
yeah.
And in both cases, I think my overall opinion is it's just very bland, very, very bland.
See, for me, I almost feel like, because you brought up the Room comparison earlier, I almost feel like this movie is as close to The Room as you're gonna get from a kind of by the numbers studio superhero movie, because everyone in this movie acts like no human being I've ever seen before in my life. They're doing things like, we're in the woods. I'm like, first of all, like what woods is right next to New York? But then it's like, yeah, just stay here, and like I'm gonna kidnap you and steal a taxi, and then we'll just walk to this diner and then like start dancing on the table to Britney Spears for no, like, everyone is so weird, and the way they talk to each other is not how human beings actually talk. And like the stuff with like the people in the jungle, it's so strange. And they'll have moments where they're like they slip in the great responsibility, like great power and great responsibility. They have to like tweak it, because I'm like, does Sony know they have the rights to say that? Like it's weird how they keep like not wanting to say that in anything post like Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. But I also like that you brought up all the Spider Women in this, because that was something that I was like, I'm going to be interested to see this. Like, I don't think that's necessarily going to be good, but I would really love to see what all these different like Spider-Man adjacent characters are going to be doing. And the thing is, with those characters you brought up, they have all these histories that I wasn't nearly as familiar with as you. That it's Madam Web and a bunch of people who will eventually be superheroes. None of them are actually superheroes in this. And so much of the marketing for this movie was them in their super suits. The poster is them in their super suits. And they're really only in their super suits in one brief scene that is a flash forward that is actually not going to happen because of the events of the movie. So it's just like, hey, these people will be superheroes eventually. Not in this movie, though, which is such an insane take for a superhero movie that I couldn't believe. And it's also like, at the same time, being like, oh yeah, Spider-Man's kind of here, but we're mostly going to talk about like Uncle Ben, who's played by Adam Scott randomly. Like, I like Adam Scott. I think that's casting that kind of makes sense, but to have him just be like young, hot at like Uncle Ben before like anything happened, and Emma Roberts is doing her best as like Spider-Man's mom. And it's just like, it's like, here's his Spider-Man's birth is randomly shoehorned into this movie while other insane. There's just I feel like there's so much to talk about in this movie. That's why I was wanted to come on here because a 2.5 star movie there might not be as much to say as a 5 star or a 1 star movie because this movie is kind of like Cuckoo Puffs, you know?
I will defend Hot Uncle Ben because we've got Hot Aunt May and it was great. So
Yeah, that's
I'll,
fair.
I'll defend Hot Uncle Ben. So I'm fine with that. Adam Scott, I'm totally cool with you being Uncle Ben. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, no
But
problem with that. It was just weird.
it is a little bit weird. It's a little bit weird. But also, yeah, and to what you were saying about and I'll say that too, the the costumes, they look really good.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
they
they're
look
pretty
really good. They're
solid.
comic accurate. They did a really good job translating to the screen. And that was actually what first gave me a spark of interest in this movie when the previews came out. Because when I heard about it, I'm
Mhm.
just like, who wants to watch a movie about Madam Web? I'm like, I don't think I'm really interested in that. And then I saw the trailer and I'm like, oh, they're going to have them all suiting up as the different Spider-Woman characters. That sounds interesting. So I got really keyed into it because of that. And then before I would have even had a chance to see it, I saw reviews saying like, oh yeah, it's just basically in one scene and like a dream sequence or a flash forward and or two scenes technically because we have that
Yeah,
one with Cassie has at the end. But that was it. And so I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm not going to see it then.
yeah,
But also
it's
you have
weird.
Ezekiel too wearing this weird Spider-Man-esque outfit, which again, that didn't come from the comics. That was something they did to try and again to have Spider-Man without Spider-Man in this movie.
Yeah, all the Ezekiel slash like Las Arañas stuff is like real weird in my opinion because like the Las Arañas they're like wearing these like tribal things that are very reminiscent of the Andrew Garfield or not the Andrew Garfield the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man and it's very strange and I'm like kind of like based on the time because this is randomly a period piece in 2003 I want to say so I feels like is this supposed to be like what version of Spider-Man is this like the Andrew Garfield one or like I guess that timeline would maybe line up but it was just really bold of them to be like because you mentioned the Ezekiel Sims where he comes from and the choice to make the spider like more magical than radioactive or anything. I think that was and correct me if I'm wrong, but something that was very controversial that a lot of people did not like when they retconned that, and for them to
Absolutely.
make that the whole movie or the whole backstory for Spider-Man and these characters, I thought was a big swing that didn't really work. And Ezekiel is kind of right at the heart of that. His character was clearly heavily rewritten. He's the only person who really gets to do any Spider-Man stuff. He's like evil Spider-Man, which I was also kind of excited for. Like, oh, this is like a bad Spider-Man. That's going to be the villain. They don't really do anything interesting. His whole his whole evil plan seems to be like steal the spider, step one, step two, question mark, step three, profit. Which is like he's a billionaire somehow from stealing a spider. It's very convoluted and weird. And just watching this movie, the amount of stuff that you know, his the actor Tahir Rahim, I think is his name.
Tahar Rahim. I think
His
I'm not sure how to pronounce it exactly, but I think it's
yeah,
Tahar. I'm not sure though.
okay, and yeah, his almost all of his dialogue is ADR. Like it'll be stuff where you'll just hear like a line over the shoulder, or something like that, because whatever plans they originally had for him in the movie, they completely changed. I think he was initially supposed to be Madam Web's dad. That all his plot though was jettisoned, and they just have him talking to somebody who was like, you know, looking at a screen, and you just hear like, "We have to stop them. They're we have to kill these girls." But you're not actually hearing him. You're barely ever seeing his mouth like moving when you're seeing him speak because they completely just chopped all of those scenes to pieces. Because he's a good actor. I've seen him in other stuff, but he's not even really acting in this other than just when you see him like walking and doing physical stuff.
Yeah, so there are a few things there that popped in my mind. I just, what, one of the things I don't understand with Sony's approach to all these movies is why are you taking this approach? Because it's clear they can make other Spider-Man movies, right? Because they've been doing
Mm-hmm.
the Spider-Verse ones. So why don't you do like a Miles Morales movie and do it in live action? And I guess maybe they want to keep that reserved for the for the animated ones, but you could do a Miles Morales thing. Or why don't you revisit the the other films you have, like the Tobey Maguire stuff? Like, there was a really great comic book they did several years back called Renew Your Vows, and it was this idea of Spider-Man and Mary Jane in the future, and they were married and they had a daughter named Annie. So I'm like, do that. That gives you something different to play with. Or go back and revisit the Andrew Garfield stuff, and maybe have, if you're worried about, complications with Marvel, anything like that, then you do something where he decides to take on a new identity. He becomes the Scarlet Spider. He becomes, he takes on the name Ben Riley or something like that. He moves to a new city. You do stuff like that. Or, I mean, lean into the Spider-Verse stuff and bring back Emma Stone and do a Spider-Gwen movie. Guarantee everybody would watch.
That's
go
what
see
I want.
it. Yeah,
I'm
everybody
like,
would watch a Spider-Gwen movie. Like,
I really hope they're saving her for Endgame or for Doomsday, whatever. Like, that whole thing. My fingers crossed, and I'm just like, please make me watch, having watched Amazing Spider-Man, worth it, just so I can see her as Spider-Gwen.
Yeah, or just do like Black Cat's another one they've got the rights to. You could do Black Cat completely divorced of the Spider-Man mythos, and it could be a great thing, like a superhero.
Well, they were going to.
Heist film.
They canceled it. They were going to do one, and
they were going to do it with Silver Sable. Yeah, they were trying
Yes.
to mash them together.
And then that got canceled, and it was going to be separate films, and then both of those films got canceled.
Yeah. And I'm like, that made a lot of sense. I'm like, yeah, do Black Cat. That makes a lot of sense. Do Silver Sable. That would also make sense. Rocket Racer would make more sense than trying to do this thing. It's what Sony's doing right now. It very much reminds me of what DC was doing back in DC has been Warner Brothers has been trying to do several times, which is the idea of doing Batman stuff without Batman, right? So you had Gotham, so you had Birds of Prey way back in the day when Smallville was on the air. You had that other, you had Batwoman, right? Which had, Bruce Wayne's gone. So, but it's still, Kate Kane is, using the Batcave and using all this stuff. But Bruce Wayne, we don't know where he is. You even had, that CW show called Gotham Knights, which I never watched, but I hear was apparently god awful. And Titans too. Even Titans leaned into the Batman without Batman stuff. And it's like, and then Sony looked at all this stuff and all the stuff that had really not really worked for Warner Brothers, and they're just like, maybe it'll work for Spider-Man though.
Yeah, it honestly feels like, and I think what you were saying about like the Marvel thing makes sense, because it feels like they're like, what characters do we have the rights to that we can make without, damaging our relationship with Marvel? Because we have this whole deal where we're working together with Marvel. And a lot of this kind of comes out of them trying to, I feel like, make their own cinematic universe with just Spider-Man characters. And they were going to do their Sinister Six movie with Drew Goddard, and they were going to do all these different things that were going to tie into, the Amazing Spider-Man. And then they're like, oh, actually, we're going to work with Marvel, because that whole thing kind of fell apart. But then they're like, we still want to make them though. Like, Venom made money. So they've been wanting to make a Venom movie for years. So they're like, we'll make 3 of those. They'll all make decent money. And then what else do we have the rights to? I don't know, Madam. And it's just, they were just throwing darts at the wall. I feel like there was going to be like a young Aunt May movie at some point, which I feel like this is kind of grew out of that in a lot of ways. It just felt like they're like, what do we have the rights to? What can we make that we can maybe say is in the MCU if we decide to go that route. Now, I guess it would be in the multiverse, with the way things have developed. But they're like things that we can like kind of like, tongue in cheek reference. I do like the way that the Venom was referenced in, Spider-Man Far From Home. It felt like the perfect way to be like, yeah, these things exist. Thank you. No Way where they're like, these things exist, but they're over here. They're well, both of them actually. How he has that like cameo with in Far From Home with what's his? No, you're right. It is No Way Home. Sorry, but the Eddie Rojas cameo. I love that. Or when he's like, "Ooh, who is that guy?" And he licks the screen. That feels like Sony understanding their lane and being like, "We're just making a bunch of stuff. If Marvel ever wants to acknowledge it, they can." Which is interestingly enough what it feels like Marvel TV was doing before it got brought into the fold when Jeff Loeb was running things, where they're like, we'll have Daredevil, we'll have Agents of Shield, and if you, hey, you guys over there, the big wigs, ever want to acknowledge us and like legitimize us, you can. And of course, now a lot of those shows have been brought back, been legitimized, but for a while they were kind of like the redheaded stepchild of Marvel, in the same way that I think Sony is now, and I don't really see them being legitimized other beyond a fun cameo like we got to see in Spider-Man.
We're going to take a quick break and then we'll talk some more about this. Blast off into a new universe with Corsairs, a new sci-fi space opera serial by me, Percival Constantine. In these adventures, join the crew of the Corsair, a group of intergalactic mercenaries, as they struggle to survive in the depths of corporate-controlled space. If you're a fan of Firefly, Cowboy Bebop, or Guardians of the Galaxy, then you're going to love Corsairs. Subscribers to my Patreon get 2 new episodes a week, while free members get 1 new episode a week starting in December. Patreon offers new subscribers a 7-day free trial, but I'm also throwing in another perk. If you sign up with the coupon code SCP, you'll get 90% off your first month. So visit patreon.com/Percival Constantine and join in the adventures. We all love superhero movies and TV shows, but what about the comics that inspired them? Marvel, DC, Image, and more have provided the template for the movies and shows we all enjoy watching, and it's important to honor that tradition by buying and reading comic books. Superhero Cinephiles is proud to be an affiliate of mycomicshop.com. It began as a small mail-order business operated by junior high school student Buddy Saunders all the way back in 1960, and has been operating on the internet since 1997. My Comic Shop has new releases, value packs, back issues, trade paperbacks, comic art, regular auctions, and a whole lot more, including 35% discounts on pre-orders. You can also sell your own comics or utilize their consignment services. You can even create your own want list of comics you're searching for. To get started, check out our affiliate link in the show notes or on the superherocinephiles.com homepage. And we're back. And something you had said right before we went on break really kind of stuck in my head. And it's this idea that maybe Sony is trying to hedge their bets with this stuff. And they're trying to say, like, maybe Marvel, hey, maybe we could get you to bring us into the cinematic universe here. And I think there might be some truth to that because, again, Ghost Spider showing an alternate version where Gwen got bit by the spider and instead Peter was the one who died. You could even do a scene where you bring in Andrew Garfield to have him get killed, and that's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer, and I keep wondering, why don't you just do that? And I think you might be right. I think it might be because they want to have this backdoor thing with Marvel so that they could just be like, hey, Marvel, we're right over here. Come on, can you let us come in and play? Right. And I think that's why, because this timeline, I was thinking about the timeline too, because this is not set in present day, right? This is, so it's set in 2003, right? And
yeah.
You're thinking about the timeline and stuff, and you're thinking about, Iron Man 2 came out in 2010, so that means Peter would have been about, 7 years old at the time of that?
Yeah, about 7 or 8 probably, yeah.
So around the time when he would have been that little kid at the Stark Expo.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to say, like, hey, yeah, and that's why it's that specific year instead of like being, 1963 or something, which would probably make a little bit more sense for Spider-Man's birth year. Set it way in the past, or just set it in the modern day then, because what's it matter? Or set it in the background of like the Andrew Garfield film, in which then you would have set it probably like in the early 90s or something like that. But specifically choosing 2003, I think that was done to say like, hey, maybe this baby is going to grow up to become Tom Holland.
Right. Yeah, I think so. I think that's absolutely accurate, and it feels like they don't have any plan for that, right? It feels like, hey, we can set it at this time, so it makes sense if you want to say it's him. But if it's not him, if it's not Tom Holland, it doesn't have to be. And they'll just do stuff, be like, we'll just put Michael Keaton in like the Morbius post-credit scene, or 2 Morbius post-credit scenes that absolutely make no sense. Like he shows up, like he's teleported there in the same way that like all the villains got teleported in No Way Home, and you're just like, why would he get, like, it just seems like they're just throwing so much stuff in, and they're like, hey, Marvel, if you want to use any of this, it's here for you.
It was so ridiculous in that scene. I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole here, but yeah, that did drive me nuts, because it made sense why Venom would end up in the MCU 616
Right.
because the whole thing was the whole idea of Strange's spell was that when it went haywire, it was bringing in all these people from the multiverse who knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, and it was all
Exactly.
drawing them towards the center of the spell. So it made sense with Venom because the symbiote has this, multiversal hive mind, which is okay. We'll go with it. It's a little bit, we're stretching things, but it's plausible in the world of, comic book science. So we can go with that. But why would it take Adrian Toomes, who knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, is from this world, and then shuffle him off into the Morbius world? That made no sense at all.
No, absolute nonsense. It's just Sony being like, is this anything? And collectively, everyone was like, nope.
And you can tell Michael Keaton was really just kind of so done when he was doing that scene.
He was just like, sure, I'll show up for a day. You'll give me how much money to cameo in this? Why not?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, okay. So, what are some things that kind of stood out to you? Anything that really kind of jumped out at you? Well, I'm going to go first because one thing that was driving me nuts is Cassie's just personality. Like, this is the weirdest, most, I don't even call her antisocial, just like asocial person I've ever seen. Like, she's like almost as bad as Ezra Miller's Barry Allen. Like, it's just like that kind of weird disconnect from what people are like. They're at this baby shower for baby Peter, who is never named, so but is hint hint wink wink for those who know. And they're going around and they're playing this game where they're asking everybody to say like one memory of their mom or something like that. And they pull out this blank sheet and everybody put it up and they fold it up. So the whole game is like you take it out, you read it, and you have to guess whose memory was that type of thing.
Right. Yeah.
And Mary Parker, she pulls out this one folded sheet of paper and it's empty. And she's like, oh, this one's blank. And then Cass is like, oh yeah, that was mine. Like, well, surely you must have some memory of your mother. She's like, and then instead of just saying my mom died when I was young and just leaving it like that, which would have been awkward enough, instead she starts going into this whole thing. It's like, yeah, my mom died in the Amazon in childbirth. But don't worry, like dying in the childbirth is kind of rare. So it was just so, it's the weirdest way to say it. And going back to what you were saying earlier, no normal person talks like this.
Yeah, absolutely not. And there's a reason that the line from this movie became a meme about my mom, who she was studying he was studying spiders in the Amazon with my mom right before she died. And that became such a ridiculous meme because it's like people don't speak like this. And they took that out of the movie because people were like, right, they're like, this is ridiculous. But there's so much stuff that wasn't in the trailers that never became memeified that got left in, like that scene, like it's just, she is like a weird robot. I'm kind of hit or miss when it comes to Dakota Johnson in general, but I think she is just really profoundly unlikable in this movie. Like there's that scene where, and it's funny because I watched this not too long after watching Bringing Out the Dead, where it's like also a movie about a EMT, like, and her like partner or his partner, and it's just like weird interactions, and maybe they're not the most likable people, but it's compelling, in a way that this is not. Like she is basically just sleepwalking through this whole movie, and her line deliveries are just so flat and weird, and they try to like, I think that's a danger when you have a character who's like, oh, we'll have this character be kind of unlikable, but they'll get redeemed. You can't, and you have to make the character have some redeeming qualities in the beginning so that you're like, okay, I don't love this person, but I would like to see them become more interesting and become better. She just sucks. She just is an awful person. She's just like, what do I do with this drawing that a child gave? And Ben appropriately is like, just throw it away later, like, you psychopath. Like, She's just so weird, and it's not even weird in a way that she is in like the Materialist, which she feels like a normal person there, like not a great person, but there's things about it that you're like, okay, cool, like you are kind of messed up, but like you're endearing in certain ways. I kind of want to see what's going to happen with you in this love triangle, whereas this, you're just like, you suck, you just suck, and I don't care about you and your weird quest to go to the Amazon, which, first of all, how does she get to the Amazon? That doesn't make sense to me. She
Thank
just
you.
shows up. Like, I'm like, this isn't a two that we've established. This is in 2003. She is wanted for kidnapping and probably Grand Theft Auto. And so this is a post 9/11 world. How does she get on a plane? Like,
And how does she move so freaking fast? Like,
right? Yeah.
this is, and I'm not gonna hold it too much against this movie. I will hold it against a little bit, but in fairness, Civil War did have the same problem. Captain America Civil War had the same problem because you did have them saying, like, you've got 48 hours, and then you've got Tony flying back to Brooklyn or to Queens, and then flying back in here, and then you have Cap, and somehow all the Avengers gather together in Germany so that they can help Cap steal a Quinjet. When it's like, but how did they get to Germany then?
Don't ever watch 2012 because John Cusack like teleports back and forth between LA and Yellowstone in like 24 hours, like constantly. He's like, hey, yeah, the sun's setting. Let's take a quick trip to Yellowstone. I'm like halfway across the country. There's a lot of movies like that bug me.
There's X-Men: The Last Stand too. Apparently, I'm not sure if if Brett Ratner knew that the X-Men are based in Westchester in upstate New York, because apparently they're like a stone's throw away from the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco.
Yeah. I know this is a tangent, but I think the worst one of those is in Transformers 2 when they're in Washington, D.C., and then they in the Smithsonian and they walk out the back door and then they're in a desert surrounded by mountains. And I'm like, what is happening right now?
It does remind me. Okay, another brief tangent, then we'll get back to Madam Web. But if the original, I can't remember the name of the game. It's this video game series where you're hacking things, and it's kind of like a GTA type thing.
Okay.
I can't remember the name of it right now, and as soon as I remember it, it's gonna make me so angry when I do remember it. But it's supposed to be set in Chicago. And so I'm driving around the city, and most of it looks pretty realistic, pretty similar to the Chicago that I know. And then all of a sudden I notice, where did those mountains in the background come from?
Yeah. Stuff like that always takes me out. Like, especially if I feel bad for all the people who live in Vancouver who and they're like, oh, this is San Francisco, and you're like, that's the university. Like, I've seen that every day.
Supernatural had a joke about that in one of their early episodes when they go to Hollywood and they're walking around the studio lot, and Sam says, "What is with this weather? I thought Hollywood's supposed to be warm, but it's like Canadian out here."
That's pretty good. I always think of the Austin Powers bit where he's like driving and he's just like, "Isn't it amazing how much the countryside of England looks nothing like Southern California?"
Yeah. Okay. All right. So back to Madam Web. And that part about her just magically transporting. And when he got to that part and he's explaining about how her powers allow her to be in different places at the same time, at first I thought, okay, maybe I missed something and she somehow accidentally transported herself to Peru. But apparently no, she flew to Peru, and I don't know how she did that.
Right. She flew to Peru, which, by the way, how did you get in a very recent like 9/11 world on a plane when you probably have multiple warrants out for your arrest and you're leaving out of New York City? That was like the height of TSA. Like,
I hadn't even considered that part, but you're absolutely right. Yeah. And then the other thing too is the interaction between these three girls, because they try so many times to force this conflict between Julia, Anya, and Maddie, and not once does it ever feel like it makes a goddamn lick of sense.
No, it's really weird. It's like this weird class thing. And I gotta say, I feel really bad for Isabel Merced in this because I think she is like an incredibly talented actress, and she's like doing her best in this. And she's either surrounded by people who their performances are shredded to pieces, they are just frankly not that great actors, or they're actors who can be good but really don't care at all in this movie. And I feel like it's funny because I saw her like at Comic-Con. She was like doing a panel on it was last year when Romulus had come out, Alien Romulus had come out, and that somebody asked her about Madam Web, and she kind of had this beat like where she was like, "Are you really asking me about this stupid movie?" Like, she didn't directly address it, but you could kind of tell that she was like, I guess I'll talk about Madam Web now. It's not like this movie at all. This is a good movie. Like, how do I say that without saying it?
Oh yeah. But yeah, I was thinking about that too, because she I loved her in Superman and her brief appearance in Peacemaker as well.
Mhm.
And also Alien Romulus, right? She was great in that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I wanted to see that new Father of the Bride. I did not see it. Did you see that?
I haven't. I haven't seen that one.
It was, I'm
I don't have like a lot of nostalgia for the original one.
Yeah, I got a little bit of it because it was one of those movies that my mom really liked when I was growing
Hmm.
up.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious to. I don't. When I saw the trailer, I was kind of curious, but I think it was a Max production. I think it came out straight on
Oh,
HBO
okay.
Max, and I think that was around the time that I just chose to cancel Max because that was when they jacked up the price,
Right, right, right.
and so I never ended up seeing that. I think it was like right before it came out, so I missed out on seeing that. But now that I know that she's in it, I'm a lot more curious about it.
Yeah, I need
But
to
yeah,
go
she
back and
was.
watch her Dora the Explorer movie too.
That's right. They did like she was like an adult version of Dora the Explorer. It's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
interesting. But
She's
also
also
you
really good.
have
I'll just say before we move off her, she's also really good in season 2 of The Last of Us.
okay, I still have to see that too.
Yeah, she's like
Uh,
that. There's some things I don't love about the season. She's really good in it.
mhm. And we had Celeste O'Connor, which I thought she was one of the few things that was kind of enjoyable about the new Ghostbusters movies, and she was great in Freaky. I loved Freaky. That was such a fun movie.
Yeah, she's I think she's like of the three of them, I'd say, she's definitely solid. I wasn't as familiar with her work as I was with Isabel Merced or Sydney Sweeney, so I didn't really know her, but I didn't dislike her. I mean, her character's also just kind of just really unlikable. I feel like throughout the whole movie, that's not her
Mhm.
fault. I think it was just not a well written. Like none of these characters are well written, particularly.
And Sydney Sweeney, I don't know, like everybody's been she's been such a like a name lately that I don't get it. I don't see what's so impressive about her to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know. She's just I don't honestly don't think she's a very good actress. She's just I think there's a couple reasons that she's really famous, but I don't think that her acting is one of them.
But Adam Scott, honestly, the most likable character in this.
Yeah, he's great. I think he's really endearing as Uncle Ben. Like I think him and then Peter Parker's mom, are I probably like she's just doing her best over there. I
Mhm.
really thought those were pretty good performances in an otherwise terrible movie.
Another thing that's weird is also the centering this all around the fact that you have these three teenagers who are going to grow up to become these different Spider Women, and it got me thinking. I know this is kind of a stupid thing, but it got me thinking about just the timeline and the logistics and stuff. Because if they're teenagers now in 2003, which is when I was my first year in university was the end of 2003, so I was about like 19 going on 20 at that time. And I'm thinking like now I'm in my 40s. And so I'm thinking about them, they'd be about the same. So you're going to have these 40 something women who are going to be the Spider Women characters to Tom Holland's Spider Man if Sony had their way, which I mean, you're not even planning appropriately for the future with these castings here, are you?
Yeah, it's really weird because they have all those lines with like, "Wow, they're just teenagers." I'm like, okay, well, these are mostly women in their young 20s, but they're like, even when they do the flash forward scenes, they don't like age them up really. They just look the same,
Not at all. Yeah.
and there'll be the lines where it's like, "Wow, they're so young. I didn't realize how young they are." I'm like, not really. Like it's bizarre.
It was like when they were talking it in a reverse. It was like the reverse of it was like kind of reminded me of Chris O'Donnell in Batman Forever. Where they're like, "You're just a kid." I'm like, "The dude's like 40. What are you talking about? You
He's
are
just
too
an
old to be a pet. You are too old to be this petulant, Chris O'Donnell."
right. He's like supposed to be this orphan, but he's also I'm like also like how I was like because covered that way back in the day on Underrated, and I one of the things I brought up was like how old is Chris O'Donnell? Because like it feels like he's supposed to be 25, but also he's an orphan. Like that's weird.
Yeah, dude, you are not an orphan anymore. You are an adult whose parents died. All right,
Exactly.
you
It's
don't
very
need Bruce
strange.
Wayne to take you in at this point.
You do, yeah. You don't need to be a ward. You could just like it's like when he wants to leave. I'm like, yeah, okay, go leave. It'd be weird if you started living with this like guy, like this billionaire right now.
At this point, the questions are really going to start coming. Oh, all right. All right. Is there anything else we wanted to say about Madam Web? Because I think I've kind of exhausted the things I really. Well, no, I will. Sorry, I keep going
Hmm.
back on arguing myself on this. There is one thing I thought I will give the movie credit for this. I did think the way they handled her predictions, her clairvoyance thing was kind of cool. The way that it just they don't they just happen, right? She doesn't realize, and she thinks she's living in the real situation. And then and then the scene kind of like plays out again, and she realizes that, oh, wait, didn't this just happen? I thought that was cool because it was also disconcerting to the audience because we didn't really know when we were in a prediction or not. And I thought that was kind of a nice way of doing that.
I see your point. I would agree if it wasn't for the way Dakota Johnson is playing / the character is written, because that scene will happen, and then instead of her just, then when we see it like again through real, she just kind of is like mean to everyone. She's like, "This just happened," and they're like, "What?" And she's just like yelling at people for no reason. She's like, "You don't need to take my blood pressure. You just did, Uncle Ben." And he's like, "What?" It's like it's just. It was kind of like nails on a chalkboard whenever those scenes would happen. So I agree that those might have worked better if the character didn't suck so much.
No, yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah, her reactions to it annoyed the crap out of me, especially after it happened a few times. And you should start thinking at this point that something else is going on here. All right, people aren't
Right.
just messing with you.
Yeah, and I like those a lot better than like when she had the visions at the beginning where like you see like the Pepsi S like falling, like the because they have a fight in a fireworks factory. I don't like that's a whole thing we didn't even touch on, but like her seeing like the kind of the end of the movie and all that, it's very movie time, like future predicting stuff. The ones that you mentioned did work a lot better than the ones that were just kind of felt like a Jean Grey ripoff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. But I will agree. Like she's just so unlikable in this role, and I think this is actually the first time I've seen her in anything. So I can't even say if it's her performance or what, but or if it's just the writing. But I think it might be a combination of both because I don't think it definitely doesn't feel like Dakota Johnson wants to be in this movie.
No, she and it's funny because if you watch her press tour for this, it's clear how much she gives. Like, no, she does not care at all about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Was there anything else you wanted to mention about this? You talked
So,
about the fireworks factory. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about with that?
the only other thing I want to talk about is we talked about how it was set in 2003. I think that this movie, one thing I will give it credit for is it does a pretty good job of being a period piece in a period that we don't often see. And I think it is all honestly a lot harder to be a period piece, something like this, or I think of like Driveway Dolls, which is set in '99, of these things that aren't like historical. Like, they're not like from ancient hit. It's not like, Back to the Future where they're going back to the 50s, or like Stranger Things where they're going back to the 80s where things are very, very different. It's like this is still within memory of like Gen Z,
Yep.
So, and I think that so these things are recent in our head. They're not just like nostalgia from back in the day. So when you're seeing something like some of it doesn't always work. Like I think the use of toxic was a little much on the nose and was pretty on the nose. But sometimes you'll just see like a blockbuster video in the background, and it's not like Captain Marvel, which was set around the same time period where she crashes into Blockbuster and it's a whole big thing. That works, but like this is like much more subtle when it comes to that. I was like, my original review for this, I think, was I on Letterboxd was I really appreciate the period accurate can of Mountain Dew Code Red, which they like still had like out. They drink, how they always drink, sodas or whatever to the side, so you can see the logos in these movies. I really thought they did a good job of capturing the 2003 of this. So I will end with a compliment for this movie that we've been ragging on pretty hard.
No, that's true. I do remember that. Like that one scene when they're in the car and Maddie takes out her phone, and then I think it was Julie. It's like, oh my God, you have a phone.
Yeah.
I remember having those exact same conversations. I think 2003 is maybe pushing it a little bit, but like in late 90s, early 2000s, like I remember very clearly, like in the year 2000 or something. I was at school and I would take my dad gave me a cell phone for like emergencies, and like I was using it to try and call him, and one of my friends like, oh my God, you have a phone.
Yeah, because I would have been, I'm a little bit younger, so I would have been 13 when this came out. So yeah, I was like a couple years younger than the characters in this. So yeah, I definitely, I don't think I had a phone then because I would have been in middle school. It would have been my last year of middle school. So yeah, I think I didn't get a phone until the next year. So I think that they really captured the moment pretty well.
But apparently now there were some reshoots done. You'd mentioned some reshoots, and some of those reshoots were done to change the setting of the time period.
Yeah,
So
I'd heard about this.
yeah, so it looks like they originally did plan to set it in the 90s to be in the same time period as the Andrew Garfield stuff.
Yeah, I think that's why I was thinking of Garfield earlier, because I think that they were trying to directly tie this to Garfield, but then it got changed and all the Ezekiel stuff got, chopped up and changed. But yeah, I think that they were like, oh, well, it makes more sense for us to tie this to Tom Holland than Andrew Garfield. I think that was the timeline.
Yeah, that was done because explicitly done so that they could backdoor this into the world of the MCU.
Right.
Obviously, and like, just I think Sony really needs to just kind of like accept this, that it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think at this point they've kind of given up the ghost. Like, I think after Craven did not do well at all, that was kind of like the last one, because they had some things in the pipes, and Venom, they were kind of like, all right, Venom made a little bit of money, but not as much as the first two. That was really the only one of these that are profitable. These all have done really bad, both critically and commercially. So I think they've really just given these up. And other than their, the animated Across / Into the Spider-Verse films, I really don't think that they're going to make any more attempts at this.
I mean, honestly, just, again, Spider-Gwen, it's right there. It's
I really hope they're just saving her for a big reveal in Doomsday or something.
Yeah, it's the only thing we can hope for.
Yeah.
All right, so I think that's all there really is to say about Madam Web. Just to, even knowing it was a disappointment, I was still disappointed by it.
Yeah, I think we've talked more about Madam Web than anyone has in about a year.
Probably. Although it did get the top of the Netflix charts since it came out, apparently.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah, I think it's on Disney Plus over here in the States.
All right. Okay, so Derick, why don't you tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, you can find me if you just go to underratedmoviepodcast.com. That's got a link to all of my podcast stuff. Or however you're listening to this, if you want to look up Underrated Movie Podcast or Infinity Stones and Dragon Bones, you'll get my podcast come up there, as well as on all social media. It's once again Underrated Movie Podcast.
All right, that's great. And as for us, superherocinephiles.com is the website, and we are also superherocinephiles.com on Blue Sky, Super Cinema Pod on Instagram and Threads, though Blue Sky is where you find us the most. And yeah, that does it for this episode. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. Superhero Cinephiles is produced by me, Percival Constantine. The show is created by myself and the late, great Derick Ferguson, our host emeritus. Visit us on the web at superherocinephiles.com to listen to past episodes or find out how you can be a guest yourself. Support the show by visiting our advertiser links or click the Buy Me a Coffee link on the website to make a one-time donation. We are Super Cinema Pod on both Instagram and Blue Sky, so please be sure to follow us. We'd also appreciate it if you could rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and share us with your friends.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening. God bless.